The following Conscious Consumer Network recording of a live broadcast is available to purchase in high definition at ethymarket.com. Support free and independent media by becoming a CCN pledger. For €10 a month, you can have unlimited access to CCN high definition downloads at ethymarket.com. Ethymarket, the ethical marketplace for conscious consumers. Each life we incarnate into has a divine purpose. For the majority of people on this planet, their purpose has eluded them. We have become so distracted with the struggle to survive that we have forgotten what we are here to do. In alignment with the sacred laws of nature, the ultimate purpose of all existence is to create and evolve. We certainly do not incarnate into life with the intention to destroy. And yet, we have come to live in a very destructive world. As a result, there are many out there who feel lost or adrift, whilst knowing deep down inside that something is very wrong with their reality. Many people wish they could do something of value, anything that is purposeful, instead of having to submit to a system of slavery in order to survive. It is important never to let go of that feeling. That is your soul crying out to you, telling you that your life has value and that you do indeed have a purpose. The most important thing you can do in life is to recognize your purpose, and often that requires a lot of soul searching. Life indeed dishes out some pretty tough challenges, which will either move you closer towards your purpose path, or will give you great training for when you finally realize what it is that you came here to do. But more often than not, the very clues about your life's purpose are hidden in plain sight, woven into the very fabric of our existence. But we are so easily distracted by irrelevant details that don't really matter, that often we miss the very obvious right in front of us. It is because of our willful ignorance of anything that does not fit our preconceived ideas that the truth about the nature of our reality is so readily hidden in plain sight. This is a very deep and personal journey, which has come to be expressed in many aspects throughout my life. This is not just an attempt to retell a bunch of research and pass it off as my own, for I am very grateful and openly acknowledge all the many wonderful people that I have been given the opportunity to work with and to learn from in order to get to the point where I've come to know what I now know. This is a journey I was always destined to go on, and likewise, how I have come to know this information forms as much a part of the story as the information itself.
You're live.
Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everybody all over the world, wherever you may be. This is Conscious Consumer Network Live, and my name is MEL VE. And if you tuned in at this time, that means you're tuned in for Dragonology. This is season 2, and we've been making a steady pace through this particular season of Dragonology, and we're going to do the same tonight. Much more picked up pace than season 1, and yeah, it's been an interesting season so far. So settle in if you haven't done so already, and myself and my princess here will take you through the episode 6 of this particular season of Dragonology. Okay, just to do a little bit of what I call an all-encompasser. So for anybody who happens to be tuning into Dragonology for the first time, you can kind of get an idea of where we're going from a realistic starting point. So why do we study Dragonology? Well, basically to understand the nature of our reality through an examination of artifacts, art, architecture, sculpture, culture, religion, ritual, theatre, music, literature, etymology, philology, and symbolism. Through deciphering our reality, we are able to grasp the very draconian nature of it and just how deep-rooted our personal programming is rooted. A course in Dragonology is aimed at deprogramming one from the serpentine matrix. So one of the aspects which I'm going to focus on quite heavily today is, of course, all things pertaining to ritual. And for those of you who aren't aware, just about all of our existence is a ritualized existence. Everything that we do in terms of, besides, let's say, even the process of going to work, which is in itself a ritual because you do the same thing pretty much every day. You get up, get dressed, jump in the car, you get on a train or whatever, public transport, go to work 9 to 5 or sometimes longer, come back. Sometimes you work a night shift in a hospital, but it's a ritual. There is a process which happens, and it's usually pretty much falls within the same template. Now, the process that happens within the same template is pretty much all the activities pertaining to what I'd call religious holidays, which are ritual holidays. They are ritual celebrations because they happen every single year. Again, it's the same thing happening again and again. Or for specific happenings or events within people's lives which are ritually celebrated. So, for example, weddings and funerals, baptisms and bar mitzvahs. But of course, there's also the celebrations that are specific to religions. For example, that would require festivities such as, at Christmas, you have a Christmas dinner, or in the case of the Muslims, perhaps they might choose to fast for Ramadan. So there's various types of rituals which we don't really think of as rituals, and they fall under lots of different labels. But what we need to do is get real prosaic about things and let's look at the root of what things really are as opposed to what they've been fluffed out by pretty labels. A good example of this is people sometimes get all hit up because this is called Conscious Consumer Network. Oh, consumers, old paradigm. But, I say to people, life is an act of consumption, okay? What do you do to air? You breathe it, okay? Breathing is an act of consumption. Eating is an act of consumption. You can call it eating, you can call it breathing, you can, reading information, okay, is consuming information. Reading, eating, and sleeping, I beg your pardon, reading, eating, and breathing are 3 different words, but they all talk about an act of consumption, okay? And that is what this is doing. We are bringing it back to what the original thing is, which is a ritualized practice started by a culture or a religious belief or for whatever reason at some point in history and perpetuated again and again and again. And because a ritual is repeated over and over again, what it does is the whole programming of the ritual actually interweaves itself into the very energetic fabric
of our reality. And therefore, it has great potency each time it is thus repeated, and the symbols are used, and the mantras are chanted. So every time specific rituals are enacted, it grows in potency. And some of them have been done so many millions and billions of times that they have very strong power within our reality. Now, one of the reasons why I bang on a lot about ritual is because culture is rooted in ritual. The truth about most of our modern day culture is that most culture is inextricably and undeniably rooted in ritual, including but not limited to theatre, music, sport, religion, festivals, parties, and, of course, paying taxes. And we've covered this all quite a lot in previous Dragonology episodes, so if you guys haven't seen it yet, feel free to go back and check those out and catch up. All right. Well, the definition of ritual. Okay, let's have a look at what that would be. That which happens at a specific time, at a specific place, for a specific purpose. Okay? So that's as simple as a definition for ritual need be. Anything else, whether you choose to dance around naked, whether you choose to bathe in blood, whether you choose to, sacrifice people, animals, or perhaps even just fruit or vegetables, whatever you choose to do, it's the intent of a specific action at a specific time for a specific purpose at a specific place. That is what defines something as a ritual. Now, what is very interesting to notice is that often with rituals are often accompanied by some kind of offering, all right? Rituals are not purposes. It seems like there's always a few things that turn up within the whole template that applies to rituals, and this applies across the board, okay? And one of the things that is normally turning up in every single ritualized practice is some form of offering. And we get into why the offering in a minute, but the concept of the offering, or the word offer, is actually rooted in the Hebrew word offer with an O-P-H-I-R, which of course is a Hebrew word for gold, okay? Which is very interesting because the word offer actually has the dragon root word ophi, O-P-H-I, which we've covered off quite intensively in many dragonologies. A good example of another word that would contain the serpent root word ophi would be the constellation of Ophiuchus, which of course Ophiuchus being the serpent bearer. We spoke about this quite a lot as well in previous dragonologies, is the concept of the offering of the first fruit. So as part of a ritual practice, sometimes what they do, for example, in spring, when they go and pick the spring fruits, as the first fruits, they would give as an offering to the Lord or God. And I just want to read this here from Proverbs chapter 3, verses 9 and 10. It says, "Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase, so that your barns will be filled with plenty, your vats will overflow with new wine." So what this is a Christianic version of a fertility ritual, or a harvest or a spring festival, okay? But it's been Christianized here in Proverbs, okay? So this is where you find evidence of how Christianity actually is commonly and originally rooted in the pagan religions, because most pagan rituals and festivals were simply rooted in fertility rituals, largely spring rituals, largely harvest rituals. We'll deal with spring and harvest rituals today. But this is an example of exactly how Christianity is rooted in originally the pagan rituals. And the concept of the first fruit, we go on to talk about that a bit more and extrapolate on that theme. But fruits, and specifically it being the first fruits, for example, like the firstborn child, would be an extension of that theme, and we'll cover that off in a minute. And of course, tithes and taxes. We've covered this off previously, Dragonology as well, but just tying this all in offering to any religious organization or in paying taxes, okay, we're actually giving sacrificial atonement, or we are giving a votive deposit or votive offering. We are giving an offering, right? For example, pop tithes into the church offering bowl. Offering, it says here, an offering to the United Methodist Church, and everyone's dollars in there. But you've seen that the bowl, people have seen it go around in churches where it's called an offering bowl because you put your money in there. Or what we used to have something called tithes, where people give 10% of their earnings, which tithes is actually where it comes from the word 10. 10% of their earnings to the church as an offering. So again, this would be considered a tax, and tithes was actually a tax in the old days. In fact, it's one of the reasons supposedly for the French Revolution was the Ancien regime was very heavy on taxes, and tithes were one of them. But of course, we've been through that as well. That's, not real either. But this is what we are taught. So tithes is a very well-known kind of 10% tax of your earnings, which you're supposed to pay to the church. But nowadays, we pay so much more than 10% in taxes, very, very overtaxed. And as we have already discussed, at least for half of the money you pay in taxes are in the bullets and the bombs which kill people. So let's talk about what a votive is. A votive deposit or a votive offering, because we spoke about this here, a votive deposit or votive offering, yeah? And that's what you're doing when you're paying taxes. A votive deposit or votive offering is one or more objects displayed or deposited in a sacred place for broadly religious purposes without the intention of recovery or use. So, for example, if you put your money, which is your sacred earnings, into an offering bowl at a church without the intention of recovery or use, that could be considered a votive deposit or votive offering. And this is where you also get the word devote. So if you're devoted to something, you would perhaps give something a votive deposit or a votive offering to show how devoted you are to that thing. Anyway, to continue here, such items are featured in modern and ancient societies and are generally used to gain favor with supernatural forces. Now, when people performed rituals, one of the reasons why they would, give the first fruits, or perhaps why they ended up giving tithes and stuff, is because they wanted to gain favor with God, or whatever deity it was they were trying to gain favor with. Sometimes it could be just a general offering to a deity, pray for something. But votive offerings are sometimes made in anticipation of a certain aim, desire, wish, or situation. Or even further, we'll go into further, sometimes contracts are entered into for a specific consideration to be rendered by whatever supernatural force that contract is being engaged with. A bit more on that in a minute. But just to give you an idea of a sort of a non-monetary votive offering, okay, this is actually, if you look up a votive offering, you'll go to Wikipedia and you'll find this very, very interesting little piece here. Part of a female face with inlaid eyes, okay, over here. That's considered a votive offering of 4th century Greece. So these votive offerings, for example, something like this, set into a niche of a pillar in the sanctuary of Asclepios in Athens. And I'll go on to talk about Asclepios in a minute. But often you'd find jewels, rings, flowers, herbs, or even works of art, masks, which would perhaps represent someone's face, be perhaps representative of a sacrificial victim, that kind of thing. So this is an artifact of an ancient votive offering, which has a part of a mask in it, beautifully done, actually. Now, this is Asclepios, interestingly enough. I think Asclepios, to me, just very much reminds me of a precursor to perhaps, Hermes-type character, or even Moses with the serpent on the staff. Basically, Asclepios is the Greek god of medicine, Very interesting indeed. But we've seen the caduceus around the, beg your pardon, the twisting serpents around the caduceus, which is the staff of Hermes, which is also the symbol of medicine. So a lot of themes do tie in here. I want to talk about this word, immolation, because it's not a word that we're commonly taught, but it is a word that I have used once or twice before, and which I suppose does deserve some more attention so that we understand exactly what it is when I use the word immolation going forward. The English word immolation originally referenced the killing of a sacrificial victim. And this word actually came figuratively to mean destruction by fire or burnt offering, which we've also spoken about or referenced as a holocaust. We know that word here in Europe, don't we? Anyway, the etymological roots of the word immolation are stemmed from the Latin word immolare, which references mola salsa. Okay, now mola is another word for mill. In Dutch, for example, we talk about milled pepper, we talk about molen. You get molens to actually mill pepper with, little pepper mills that you grind pepper at the table, for example, or a salt molen, which you can also grind sea salt with. So what's interesting is that this is actually talks about ground mola, okay, which is a coarse ground toasted emmer wheat. Okay, and mills are commonly used to grind wheat as well. All right, so mills are very significant. So that's what mola is. It refers to the process of grinding wheat. But sal, obviously, salt is a mixture of salt. So immolare, which references mola salsa, is referencing a mixture of salt, which would be the salsa, and coarse ground toasted emmer wheat, which would be the mola. And of course, it's toasted because it's got to be a burnt offering. Okay. So this is the root of where this word comes from. It actually comes from a mixture of coarse ground toasted emmer wheat, which is referenced as mola salsa, which was traditionally prepared by the Vestal virgins, and it was sprinkled. Now this mola salsa mixture was used and sprinkled in the Jewish traditions. They sprinkle salt, and in ancient Roman rituals, this mola salsa was used for rituals by the Romans, and it was only specifically prepared by the Vestal virgins. So let's look at who the Vestal virgins were, okay, because this gets interesting. Vesta was a Greek goddess whose presence and prominence and importance in ancient Greece is often not spoken about. You don't really come across Vesta often, okay? But the Roman goddess Vesta's presence is always symbolized by a burning fire, okay? And this is often why you have burning fires at the altar, for example, hearths in the home. Often the whole process of lighting a fire in the home was seen as a tribute to Vesta. And there was a very ritualized way you went about doing this. Same with cooking meals. Often, people pray at dinner and stuff as part of a ritualized celebration in thanks of a meal. But often the way you go about preparing the meal was part of the ritual as well. The process of cooking is part of ritual practice. We never used to prepare food by cooking, by burning, by immolation, okay? That is something that's been passed down to us through ritual. All these cooking programs on TV are nothing better than sport programs because all they're teaching us is another way to engage in ritual. Very interesting that. But the significance of the goddess Vesta is what we're speaking about now, and her significance in the Roman religion is indicated by the prominence of her priesthood and the priesthood that is dedicated to her, because it was the only college of full-time priests in Rome, okay? So for there to be a college of full-time priests, they must be pretty damn important. And they were usually virgin priestesses. So it's interesting to note that the only full-time college of priests in ancient Roman religion were actually women, and they were supposedly virgin priestesses. This gets very interesting. Let's have a look at the significance of this stuff. We've spoken about this before, the symbolism of salt. Now, why I'm going on to salt, obviously, because we're talking about this mixture, mola salsa, which is made of salt and wheat. So the themes we're going to be focusing on from here are the salt and the wheat and why they're so significant. Because mola salsa, made by the Vestal Virgins, okay, salt is a repeating theme when it comes to dragonology. And of course, we spoke about this previously. Saltus, the word saltus actually is a reference to the female vagina. Now, we spoke about this last week too. Soot is etymologically cognizant with the Dutch word zout, Z-O-U-T, which means salt, okay? And we'll speak about why soot is important now. But basically, as we've already said, saltus, feminine noun for salt, can also mean the female vagina, but references salt or seawater. And the masculine noun would be sal, okay, for salt or seawater. Now, soot obviously fits into the word sota, which again, sota is disguised in Greek as esoterikos, all right, and that, of course, is the word esoteric, all right, that we've become aware of in English. So esoteric is rooted in the word sota, which obviously also references salt. And it is extrapolated in Latin as sodalis. Okay, now, what's interesting to note is that salt is actually known as sodium chloride. So soda, or a soda, and salt, in terms of the chemicals that they are very closely linked to. So sodalis are members of a secret society or priestly college, and we've spoke about the Vestal Virgins being part of a priestly college. So it all ties in. We've spoken about this previously as well, the covenant of salt, all right, which is indicative of the submission of women being the human votive or human sacrifice, or the devoted thing, the devoted human that was devoted to that particular ritual practice, okay? So the covenant of salt, or the salt covenant, is indicative of the woman or human votive, which is ritually celebrated through angelic rape, okay? It's indicative of submission to ritually celebrated angelic rape, indicative of the hidden votive. We've spoken about the hidden votive. Now, an example of the hidden votive would, for example, be the gifts you put under the Christmas tree because they're wrapped, they're concealed, they're veiled. We covered that all of previously as well. And that is a good example of a hidden votive. Someone has to sacrifice. They have to go out and spend money or do whatever to, or spend time creating that present, which they then give to another. So it is their devotion to the concept of Christmas and engaging in the ritual of the giving and receiving, which again is nothing more than homage to angelic contract. Okay. Now, again, we spoke about the salt and the wheat. Let's touch on the wheat briefly. So wheat is a commonly used symbol of fertility and harvest, okay, and is the main ingredient in bread. Pretty simple, we all know that. Pretty commonly used substance wheat is. But what's interesting to notice here is wheat ties into Virgo, the Virgin, which, if you look at Virgo, the depiction of Virgo, supposedly a virgin, all right, with, I beg your pardon, wings, like an angel, an angelic being, carrying what? Wheat. Isn't that interesting? So here we've got a virgin representative, like the Vestal Virgins, which makes the mola salsa, which is the wheat and salt mixture. Here we've got Virgo, the Virgin, holding wheat. All right. Now, why you've got Virgo, the Virgin, holding wheat is because Virgo happens in harvest season, which we're in now. We're in this season. We're in the star sign of Virgo at the moment, being between the 23rd of August and the 22nd of September. This is harvest season. This is when you see lots of pumpkins coming out, and this is when the farmers go and harvest everything for their before winter comes along. And this is the reason why you have Virgo depicted with wheat, because it is a ritualized celebration. Now, Here's another interesting goddess that we find depicted with wheat and, funny enough, with serpents, is the goddess Ceres or Demeter. And the daughter of Demeter, supposedly Proserpine, or another word for Proserpine is Persephone. Now, it's quite interesting because Persephone is said to disappear for winter and come back in summer. But what they are talking about there is the whole sun cycle again, all right? This being a sun goddess, Persephone being a sun goddess, disappearing in winter and rising again in summer. And Ceres was the Roman goddess of fertility, agriculture, and grain crop. And here you can see depicted with sheaths of wheat in her hands and obviously wrapped in serpents. Excuse me. Now, what's interesting to notice is when you look at the name of Persephone, of Proserpine, you can see serpine, which refers to, obviously, that's a serpent word. But Persephone as well, per is a dragon root word. We'll go on to touch on that in a little bit. Remember that. So these two words, both Persephone or Proserpine, have very clear dragon etymological roots in the names, supposedly the daughters of Ceres, also known as Demeter. But very interesting to note that depicted both with wheat sheaves as well as serpents. Now, we spoke about wheat being the main ingredient of bread. Indeed it is. And bread is commonly used in Eucharistic rituals, all right? This is not new to anybody who has been to church. I'm sure you have at some point participated in the drinking of the wine and the eating of the bread, which is described as the body and blood of Christ. Jesus very much says, I am the bread of life. Or supposedly he said that in the Bible. So it's interesting to see how the wheat allegory and the bread allegory is so important, particularly since there is a huge tradition of feasting and eating at rituals. And very much one of the most common rituals that we come across is the Eucharistic rituals, where you're required to eat the body of Christ, being the bread, and drink the wine, which is drinking blood, represents of drinking his blood, which all very ritualized, but we kind of don't get it when we're participating in this stuff as kids. As I already spoke about, feasting and fasting, a huge part of ritual as well. So, like, we eat the bread as the body of Christ. What's interesting to notice is that this feasting or fasting forms very much a part of festivals. Now, let's have a look at this etymology here. So we've got feast, all right, and then that breaks down to the two words fast and fest. All right, fest, obviously referencing a festival. And festival, another word for festival can be party. And the word party is also rooted in dragon etymology, and we'll go into that in a minute. But all of these words are rooted with each other. They come from the same origins. And what's interesting to notice is we've often spoken about how themes that pertain to the dragon are sometimes contrasting and contradictory or complete opposites. There's a lot of duality. Again, there is a duality, a complete opposite between feasting and fasting. An example of fasting, of course, would be the 40-day fast of Ramadan, where they fast from sunrise to sunset. Again, here we go with the cycles, the solar cycles, which are always inextricably a part of ritual. If it's whether we're talking about the daily cycles or even if we're talking about the entire year cycles, the cycles of the sun form a part of ritual. It doesn't matter which religion you're in. They're inextricably linked to ritual because these things are played out at specific times of the year, and that is marked out obviously by the route of the sun around the year. I beg your pardon, the route of the passage of the earth around the sun, I should say. So we spoke about harvest, and now we go on to spring, okay? That's usually around about March, April season, okay? In the Semitic family of words, Adar, which also can refer to Adam, and we've dealt a bit of that in previous dragonologies, describes the lambing season in about March or April. And this is also sort of where we start getting on to Ishtara and Easter and that kind of thing. But for now, we're going to reference it under the Semitic name, which is the celebration of Purim. All right. This particular festivity, which is the spring festival, was originally known as Purim. I love this little picture of these spring lamb sacrifice. Very interesting to notice is that flowers are normally put with a sacrifice, as is with funerals. Funerals are nothing but a religious ritual as well. And you notice that flowers are deposited there, much like you have flowers deposited with a wedding, which is also a ritualized practice. You can't really see it in this particular picture, but what's interesting to notice is this particular little lamb has a halo above its head, indicating that this is a votive sacrifice devoted to the veneration of the dragons or the angels, because halos are inextricably linked with depictions of angels. Now let's talk about Purim a little bit. Purim is based on the Greek word interpreted as the drawing of lots. And this goes even further back than we can even imagine, this whole drawing of lots concept. An example of modern day drawing of lots is perhaps you draw straws to see who gets the shortest straw. And the person with the shortest straw supposedly gets to do the dirty work or the work that no one else wanted to do. And it's very much the same thing. The drawing of lots, or lotto, as we've come to know in modern terms, where people, watch these lots get drawn, these balls get drawn through lots, which is where you get the word lotto from, or you win the lottery. So that's where the word Purim originates from. It's interpreted as the drawing of lots. Now, where this concept of the drawing of lots, lotto, and all of that comes from is way back. And this is when dragons and dragon kings basically were more commonly known to the people. More people knew that their kings were dragons and that dragons ruled the land, kind of thing, and terrorized the land. And there's lots of ancient stories about how villagers were required at certain times of year as part of ritual sacrifice to offer up a virgin to the dragon as a sacrifice. And this way the dragon would leave the villagers alone or give peace for another year, or if a virgin was not issued, it would attack the village. And this is a very old story. There's so many variations of this. I mean, the story of St. George and the dragon has inklings of this particular theme in it. But basically how these virgins were selected was everyone in the village who had a daughter had to put their daughter's names into a lot, and then the lots were drawn. And this is where the whole festival of Purim originates from, because it was the drawing of lots for the virgin sacrifice to the dragon king. So this has an amazing back history to it. And in fact, you see this particular story playing out, the drawing of lots, playing out recently in films which have a hell of a lot of interesting allegories to them, such as the Hunger Games, where lots were drawn for the person who gets to be the tribute. A tribute's another word for the votive or the sacrifice, okay? Because yes, what you're doing is you're paying tribute to the gods by giving a devoting sacrifice, which in this case, we're talking about the virgin sacrifice, yeah? And that's basically what Purim, or where Purim was based, was in this concept of the drawing of lots of the virgin sacrifice to the dragon king, or to the angels, or to the gods, which are basically all the same entities. Now, the word Purim is etymologically cognizant with the following words: por, P-O-R-E, meaning fruitful, and pre, which means fruit, okay? We get into the fruit allegory quite a bit in previous dragonology, so I'm just going to skip through this, but I've covered this off quite intensively. There's so many different types of fruit that you can trace to dragon etymology. It's actually cannot be a coincidence. The most common fruits that we come across, all rooted in dragon etymology, all of them: banana, grape, apple, pear, orange, lychee, and avocado are all rooted in dragon etymology. And I've been through this quite intensively before. So if you've missed this, please go back and check it out. And I'm not going to pull them apart, but we will cover some of this. So, for example, pears rooted in this particular one. Purim, which obviously is the festival we've spoken about, which talks about the drawing of lots, which of course indicates the referencing of the sacrificing of the virgins to the dragons. Purim originates with the Akkadian noun Pior. We deal with Pior a lot, all right? We've dealt with Pior a lot in previous dragonologies. The word Pior means serpent or dragon. And there are other words which are offshoots of the word Pior, or there are words which are etymologically rooted in the word Pior, such as Peri, which is a Persian race of angels or dragons. Okay, they're referenced as the Peri. Or pure, okay? Something is the pure bloodline, pure dragon bloodline, for example, which is where the word pure comes from. And then purple, they're purple born, they're born of the dragon bloodline. Then pair, we talk about the twisting snakes, or often see snakes in pairs, or the couple, we see this a lot of Cambodia, the Naga dragon king and queen. Very much always see paired serpents as well. And then the fruit, the pear, obviously, and pearl. Talk about pearls of wisdom. We've gone into that quite a bit in previous dragonologies. And then peer, which can be either a colleague, a peer, or to look, as in peer or see. And then appear, okay, or disappear for that matter. Also rooted in the word pure, and peace. We'll get into that one because that's interesting. Now, the word pure, for those who have been following along previous dragonologies, will be perfectly aware that pure is actually part of what I call a serpent root word triad, which is, I beg your pardon, pure, pala, and para. Pala and para sort of stick to pure as part of this little group where you've got some very interesting dragon root words coming out, okay? So pure, pala, and para, and I mark them in purple often because dragon root words are normally marked in purple. These are inextricably linked to the same dragon etymological roots. Here are some of the words that you'll find originating from this particular root triad. I've already covered some of them off. But palace, for example, the word pala is a Sanskrit word for a serpent-like king or deity. So where do they live? They live in a palace. And then we've got para, right? Paradise, the concept of Eden, which of course is where you have the, the talking serpent and the whole fruit, forbidden fruit. We've covered that off, the allegory of the fruit. And of course, reading, writing, literature, all of that inextricably linked with dragons. We've covered that off a lot with paragraph and paraphrase. And then parler, a French word for to speak, play, some theatre play or children play in a sandbox, for example. Party, festival is a synonym for party. And of course, pear, I've got the word pear there twice. I think I meant to mean the fruit, the pear. Pearl, pear, Pierre, peace, we've done already. And there's some other roots we've covered off, Peri and Pere. Persia, the Persian Empire, the word Persia came from this. Pure and purple. So we've got the pure root down and the variations of that. What's interesting to notice is, as we spoke about the word appear and disappear, also rooted in dragon etymology. But this, for me, is one of the most interesting things. Is this is a theme that turns up again and again and again, is that dragons have this ability. There's two abilities that they have. One of them is to appear or disappear, sort of just be there out of nothing and suddenly then just not be there. Or they also have the ability to shapeshift and change shape, so from one form to another. Well, of course, if they can appear and disappear, why not be able to change shape? So these are typically things which, for example, I myself don't necessarily even see that I'm capable of here in this physical being and body and density. But no matter what language you go into, okay, you will find that anything that references the concept of appearing or disappearing, you'll find dragon root words in them. Okay, for example, the Latin word for appear, pario, okay, it's got the dragon root word in there, okay, from para, which we see here. That's a pure pala-para triad root there in the word pario, which is the Latin word for appear. Now, the sudden appearance of God in the Bible is referenced as a theophany of the Lord. We've also got a Saint Theophania, which pops up as well in mythology. Pardon me. So the Greek word theophany or theophania contains two very interesting dragon roots. We've covered this off a lot, which is the the and fein root. So you've got the fein and the. Let's just go into that quickly so that those who aren't aware understand. The word the basically references God. Gods reference the dragons reference the angels reference the angelic bloodlines, the kings, royalty, rulers of the world. And the word the turns up in some very interesting places. For example, we've already spoken about theophany. Theotokos basically is the offspring of the gods. Jesus was referred to as Theotokos. Theoreanthropy, which refers to the process of shape-shifting or changing shape from one animal form or one form to another. Hemithoi, meaning half god, half human. Pantheon, supposedly where the gods lived. Here's a depiction of a pantheon in Rome with an obelisk outside. And then Athens, and of course Athena, the theatre, and theory, all with the root in it. And of course, the other root I want to touch on quickly, because we cover this off quite extensively theme-wise, is, of course, fanes, all right? So we've got here Theophania, and fanes references the Greek god of a god from, I beg your pardon, fanes is a god which originates in Greek mythology from the Orphic mysteries and is also known as protogonos. And gon, all right, is a root of dragon, is rooted in the word jinn. You find the words genius and genie and Genesis all being from that particular root. But what this means is protogonos, this particular god, was firstborn. And this is where the firstborn allegory is so important and why we're always the first fruits and the sacrificing of the firstborn. Okay, interesting to notice fanes depicted with wings and in a cosmic egg, which has the zodiac carved into it. That's how you know it's fanes, often with a serpent wrapped around him. Cloven hooves, and sometimes being antherianthropic with animal forms coming out of him. I beg your pardon, yeah, it's therianthropic. Firstborn sacrifice. So Thanes being the protogonos, which was the primordial or original firstborn, okay? The firstborn sacrifice is a celebration of Thanes, okay? The marking or the sacrificing of the firstborn is an homage to the protogonos, the firstborn god. And this is, again, played out in Christianity, or actually it's in the Old Testament, in Judaic literature as well, as the allegorized story of Isaac and Abraham, all right? And you get the story turning up in Islam as well, is the story of the sacrificing of the firstborn, allegorized in the story of Isaac and Abraham. Firstborn, first fruits, first God, primordial God, all that ties in together, and that is the reason for this particular votive sacrifice is an homage of the first god. Themes associated with the dragons. We've already spoken about some of these, but just to cover this off, disappearance and appearance, shape-shifting, duality, of course, the paradox and contradictions, putting a glamour on things. For example, the fact that they're winged serpents but depict as beautiful angelic angels. That's a pretty common theme of dragons. And of course, sacrifice, particularly of the firstborns or the first fruits. That comes up a lot, firstborn and first fruits. And particularly the fruit allegory just plays into absolutely everything. I want to talk about the concept of peace, because we did mention earlier that from the pala-para-pio root, you also have the word peace, which is interesting because we all think of peace as a state of affairs which we deem desirable for our longevity and sustainability here on earth. And yeah, for me, when I think of peace and I wear my little peace necklace, for me, what it means is a state of affairs where we stop manufacturing arms, we take all the money that goes into manufacturing arms and fighting wars across the world, and we put it into feeding, clothing, homing, and caring for the sick, suffering, and poor around the world, which, as you know, we know it would do many times over. It's a hell of a lot of money that goes into fighting wars. For me, that is what I see as the concept of peace. Okay? But what they like to do, these our deceivers who have tricked us into using this dragon language, is they give us concepts which are rooted in dragon etymology. And there's nothing peaceful about these dragons. For them, the only theme I keep coming across is themes of conflict, of war, of pain, of anguish, of fury, of suffering. That's what I keep coming across. So there is, in my terms of peace, I don't see that as something associated with them. However, the word peace is rooted in dragon etymology. Now, again, as we've spoken about, some of these concepts of paradoxy and contradiction, this is one of them, all right? They use a dragon root word to be paradoxically or contradictorily used. And what it gets us to do is gets us to pay into these concepts so much energy. Oh, we believe that's what it means, but it doesn't really. It doesn't really, because when you start digging into the allegory of what these beings are actually all about, it's nothing peaceful about them, even though you're using the word peace because you don't want to fight and you want abundance. Peace doesn't mean peace. Now, what's interesting is the dove is a symbol of peace. All right, now let's get into this. Why the dove? Here, it's not just the word peace, but it's the symbols they used to depict peace, which are also, again, very frickin' questionable. The use of the dove symbolism does not denote peace, rather it masks the dragon, as evidenced by the etymology. The word dove in Latin is columba. The word serpent in Latin is colubra. Look at the etymological cognizance between columba and colubra. Again, why did they call him Christopher Columbus? Okay, it's because it's hidden allegory in the name. Why do they have columns almost everywhere in churches? Again, that is all rooted in the dragon serpent rooting. Kolu, kolo, kulu, and kula. For example, Dracula. Yeah? These are all dragon root words, clear cut. Please go back and watch my previous dragonologies to understand more about this. Okay, but the word for dragon, even in French, I beg your pardon, the word for dove, even in French, is columbe. And the word for dove in Latin is columba. The word for serpent is colubra. So the dove is actually allegorical of the serpent, not of peace. Just like the word peace is allegorical of the serpent, not of peace. So you see where we're going with this. The concept of peace in return is synonymous with love. We talk about, peace, love, flowers and rainbows, happies and daisies, love and peace, everybody, and hippie hoo-ha, whatever. But something more sinister going on here, because we get marketed love and peace under the guise of being about love and peace when they're not. Okay? And again, the links are obvious. The word love is etymologically cognizant with the word dove. In fact, I don't think of any other words besides hove, which has more cognizance with the word dove than love. And what is a dove? Doves are symbols of the dragon, which is seen through the language. Yeah. It's not very hard to work this all out and see how this all ties into each other. Here's an interesting one. Talk about words associated with war and conflict. Victory and glory. Yeah? Very interesting. Many words associated with war and conflict contain dragon root words such as victory and glory, because the or, serpent root word, the most common of all serpent root words is or, O-R. Now, Victoria, for example, Queen Victoria. You notice all these names are very interesting. Queen Elizabeth, Elizabeth. Not an accident. So, history is written by the victors, as Napoleon Bonaparte famously once said. Interesting to see that the victor of the war tells the story. Story. Let's look at story, because story is interesting. What the variations of stories. Let's look at words which are variations of stories. Obviously, stories of the past told by a particular person or from one particular perspective has become known as his story, the story of him or one person. Never her story, because we're living in a patriarchal society largely, but his story, okay? So the story of the past is his story, and sometimes stories of the past are played out in plays, which are performed in theatres. So fairy tales are sometimes performed in theatres too, and fairy tales are sometimes referenced as fables, or they're also known as fantasy. They're also known as parables, okay? Fable and parable, okay, got the same bull in, but fa and fa come from the same root as fairy, fable, and fan. We've spoken about the fan from phantom, from fanes. So here we've got the pa, which P and F are inextricably linked in terms of their similarity and the role they play in language, because the PH makes the F sound, obviously. But what's interesting to notice as well is the word legend. It's got the genie, a gen, root in, which comes from jinn. So all of these reference story, but all of these words are also rooted in dragon etymology. That's very interesting. So anything pertaining to a story, a fairy tale, fable, fantasy, parable, legend, theatre, play, all those words are rooted in dragon etymology. Very, very interesting, that is. Okay. So we're talking about war and conflict, defend and fight. There's a lot of this themes that go on within the words of associated with dragons. For example, any winged being, a winged being known as a fairy, the word fury, very close to the word fairy. Angel comes from the word anguium, from which we get angui, anguish, and angry. Fane, okay, obviously pain. Spoke about fanes earlier. And then here's another one. Defend comes from the Latin root parere, okay, from the para root word, which comes from the pure para serpent root word triad. So parere means to defend, fight and defend, all warring type words. What's interesting to notice as well is, especially when you watch things like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, is the inextricable connection between dragons and magic. Their ability to be able to do what we human beings seemingly can't. For example, we've already spoken about the ability to appear and disappear, and the ability to change shape, theoranthropic. So those seem to be magical powers, don't they? And the connection between dragons and magic is indicated by the etymological similarity between the words sorcery and soros. Now, soros, for example, dinosaur or tyrannosauros. Sauros is a Latin word for serpent or reptile. All right, that's what soros is. Soros and sorcery, the words are very etymologically close to each other. Now, dragon seduction, this is another theme that comes up. Seduction, seduce, rape. But the word seduction is very interesting because we spoke about the Sodalis, which are the priesthood, which engage in worship of the dragon. Sodalis priesthood are also known as the Sordusi, okay, and that sword is from the same roots that you would get sod, as in sodomy, or Saudi, or Soros, which we've spoken about here, which is the Latin word for serpent or reptile. So Sordacy is where we get the word seduce. Okay, and a Sordacy is actually referencing one of these sodalist priests. And as you can see, Sordacy is is from the original roots of Sod, Saudi, and Soros, which you get the word seduce. We have a lot of this kind of dragon seduction going on, dragon rape. Anyway, the sodalists practice sodomy as part of ritual, as indicated by the root word sod. Okay, and this is the Warren cup. It's a very old Roman artifact. Yeah, showing a man and a young boy engaged in sodomy, acts of pederasty. Now, rape and seduction and pederasty and all that kind of thing were very much part of ritual celebration. The practice of rape is indicative of the hidden votive. Okay, so that is what rape, the whole, why rape, kind of thing. It just seems like, so unnecessary. But what it is indicative of the hidden votive, the hidden tribute, which is given as part of the veneration of dragons and angels. Okay, it's part of the ritual celebration. Now, this over here is depicting the rape of Persephone. We covered Persephone off earlier. Visited her. Very, very beautiful carving, which I think is in the Vatican Museum. It's incredibly beautifully detailed. Now, again, I want to just bring to people's attention that if people are going to go to all the effort to carve something in marble, it's got to be important, because it is not easy to carve this. This is skill. They want this preserved. They want these themes there for others to see. Remember, it's the things which people find important that find place in their mythologies. And, if they find it important enough to carve it in stone, we need to look at what it's trying to tell us has been protected by the allegory. What symbolism is being played out? What ritual is being indicated? And rape is very much indicative of the hidden votive. Obviously covered off what the votive is. And, in fact, the rape is so important that not just in sculpture, but in classic works of art, they like to depict rape again and again and again. It keeps coming up. A beautiful picture, the rape of the daughters of Leucippus. Just one of the most phenomenally, staggeringly beautiful pieces of work, because of all the motion and movement that's happening here in these particular artworks. Absolutely insanely beautifully done. But what's interesting to note is also the rape of Europa. And this one, this is a painting that has been reinterpreted by so many different grandmasters. You kind of have to wonder, why do they keep wanting to depict the rape of the same freaking goddess? What is it? Why? Why constant rape depicted in artworks and in sculpture? It is because raping is considered part of the hidden votive traditions that are done in veneration of the dragons and the angels. And that's why you have cult ritualized rape, satanic ritual abuse, you want to label it under that, or why they engage in the rape aspect of it. And as well, this is as old as, any celebration, is child sacrifice. Ritual would not be ritual without child sacrifice. It's just inextricably linked. The practice of child sacrifice is as old as culture itself. It has gone on throughout history and continues today. The elites and controllers of our planet practice these rituals, which include feasting on the flesh and blood of the votive. The votive, of course, being these beautiful little babies who have all been killed off for their blood. And of course, bloodletting, again, ritual depicted in artwork, right? This is just so much detail here. And look at all these faces, just looking at each other. This seems to be something that is pretty commonly done, nicely dressed elites at a ritual where they're collecting the blood of a votive. This would be the votive, the virgin sacrifice, possibly. And these are very interesting pictures of ritual that I happened to find on the internet. These three came together. Here we've got possibly a virgin depicted sort of upside down with the serpent coming on around her like that. This is here, we've got what looks like demonic or dragon rape. And again, more sort of like, sexual positions with lots of very interesting symbols around them. Here, upside down. Star, pentagram, serpents, triangles with what looks like eyes in them, very interesting little ciphers on the side here. But this I found to be particularly menacing for some reason, these particular depictions, which is why I thought I would include them. Anyway, now these kind of rituals and stuff that go on are obviously protected by these secret societies, and they protect this whole ritual, rape, votive, dedication, covenant of salt, and the fulfillment of the covenant of salt. This is very much the primal agenda of these secret societies, such as the Freemasons and stuff. And, you see all the symbolism turning up again. We've spoken plenty about tessellation, the cubes last week in Dragonology. And of course, the columns we spoke about a bit this week, what the etymology means. Oh, here we've got winged angelic beings, always turning up. And of course, the eye in the sky, and the sun and the moon, and from darkness to light, the duality. It's all there, all the themes. You just need to look, and you will find absolutely everything. Now, talking about this angelic or demonic rape, okay, I want to get into some interesting territory here, bringing things up to a more contemporary note, I should say. Rosemary's Baby. If you haven't seen it, please go see it. It's extremely disturbing. That's not the reason why you should see it, just see it for research, but it is extremely disturbing. Rosemary's Baby is a film by Roman Polanski. And basically, Rosemary's Baby, the film, depicts the impregnation of a woman by the name of Rosemary with a demonic being without her knowledge. She was drugged and she was raped. But the scary thing is, the satanic cult actually contracted with her husband. Her husband basically gave up his wife, who was Rosemary, as the votive sacrifice and allowed her to be raped by the devil. So all these themes play out in this particular film. And she does indeed give birth to what they think is the Antichrist, which if you have a look in the end, you actually see a flash of the eyes with the split pupils of this baby that she's given birth to and that she then decides to look after. Very scary. And this is one film I think that could definitely do with a remake if anyone feels like remaking it, because it is one scary film. Very interesting. Rosemary's Baby was filmed at the Dakota building, which is the building outside which John Lennon was shot, because that's where he lived. A number of very interesting occult-orientated celebrities have lived in that building. No coincidence at all. Roman Polanski knew what he was doing when he filmed it there. Roman Polanski is also responsible for this rather disturbing piece of work called Chinatown. Jack Nicholson is also a very disturbing individual. He's very highly knighted. He's a papal puppet through and through. And you can see that by some of the films he's done. But basically, this film with Jack Nicholson and Faye Dunaway, who, by the way, is a very highly initiated witch herself. So these guys all work together, right? Roman Polanski made this very controversial film. When it was released, it was very, very controversial because of the fact that it played out a very intense storyline, a very blatant storyline of pedophilia and incest being the central theme. And there's a famous scene where Jack Nicholson is slapping Faye Dunaway because he wants the truth. He's going, I want the truth, damn it. And she says, talking about her daughter, saying, she's my daughter, she's my sister, she's my daughter, she's my sister, she's my daughter and my sister, because her father had raped her and the child she had born was actually her father's child, therefore making it technically her sister and her daughter. Very, very, very disturbing film, because in the end, the little daughter ends up with a pedophile character, the person that ended up raping Faye Dunaway to begin with. And you see the father putting his arm around the daughter and rushing him off. And you know exactly what's going to happen in the end to that little girl. It's a very, very sad story, but nonetheless, it's supposedly a cult classic. Rather disturbing, that is. What's interesting to notice is Roman Polanski is not short of controversy, and basically there's been so much filth that's been brought out about this man, and particularly this one person, Samantha Geimer, who said that at 13 she was assaulted by Roman Polanski. Apparently she was drugged and he anally assaulted her, he sodomized her at Jack Nicholson's house. At a party or something, but this is what goes on. Pedophilia is Hollywood's best kept secret. It is the deep, darkest secret of Hollywood. It is what they engage in, pederasty and rape, because it's part of ritualized practice, all in veneration of the angels and dragons. So the story goes, in 1977, director Roman Polanski drugged and anally raped a 13-year-old girl. This is not an allegation. He admitted in court to a judge and jury that he did this. Anyway, he tried to bargain a plea to deal with a reduced sentence, but the judge backed out on the bargain. So Roman fled the country. He fled the US, and he's not allowed to return to the US or he will be arrested. However, that has not stopped him from making film after film after film and remaining a very wealthy man. And this goes to show that Hollywood elite are protected from up on high. Okay, those who engage in these rituals are connected to the darkest devils on the planet. That is how Roman Polanski has escaped prosecution. Okay, so I love this part. Post Roman Polanski proving that just because you drug and have sex with someone, doesn't that mean you should go to jail for it? Yeah, he's still out and about, and he made this film called The Ninth Gate, which is also a very interesting film. And this I really enjoyed this film. Do go watch this. Johnny Depp, Lena Olin, I think it is, as the absolute gorgeous female character. But yeah, the story is basically about how a book collector or someone who procures very rare books or collects very rare books is employed by a very wealthy man to track down a very rare book, which this guy who commissioned Johnny Depp to collect this book, he wants the book so that he can summon Lucifer because it's got some very rare engravings in it. And Johnny Depp chases down this book all over Europe and eventually finds all the engravings and brings it to a burnt down castle, half burnt down castle where a ritual is in progress and all sorts of, very dark stuff. But what's interesting to notice is despite the fact that Roman Polanski is in fact wanted for the rape of a 13-year-old girl, he could still get actors like Johnny Depp, who to me is one of the greatest actors of our time. He can get actors like Johnny Depp to be in his film. Because this film was made, I think, in the 90s or the noughties. It's much later than Rosemary's Baby. But a very interesting film nonetheless. Here's a depiction of that castle in which all of this rituals happen. But yeah, a nice little depiction on the front cover of an upside-down pentagram with devil's horns and what would be dragon wings, I would imagine. Yeah, look at that. Very interesting. Now, this is interesting as well. Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate. Oh, bless your heart. Anybody who... I feel sorry for people who think that I want to marry a celebrity, I want to marry a superstar, I want to marry a footballer, because often these guys are so contracted up to their necks in filth that the people that are around them often end up being votive or end up having their lives messed up significantly. Oh. Anyway, Roman Polanski sacrificed his pregnant wife, actress Sharon Tate, in return for success, fame, and fortune. Very sad this story is. Basically, Sharon Tate was ritualistically murdered by the Manson crew, Charles Manson and the Manson gang, while she was pregnant. Yeah, she's very pregnant here. This is the actual scene. It was horrific. Ropes around her neck and everything. She was stabbed to death. And it's interesting enough to notice that this particular house where this particular ritual murder happened, John Lennon and the Beatles often used to go tripping there with Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. Now, Brian Wilson's also a Satanist, very commonly known. And yeah, the Beatles have covered them quite extensively in previous Dragonologies as to some of the stuff that they got up to. But the fact that they used to go tripping, take acid and trip out in this particular house, where at a later time, Roman Polanski's wife was then ritualistically stabbed to death while she was pregnant. It's pretty severe stuff. And there's no coincidences. There's a reason why all these people are connected to each other, while they hang out in the same houses and stuff. It's because they're all involved in these cults, these dark, dirty cults, which ritualistically sacrifice people. And of course, that is the price of fame. Let's get into this a little bit. Now, from the Greek god Phanes, which we've dealt with a little bit earlier, we get the words pain, fan, and fanatic, and of course, fame. And yes, indeed, fame does kill. Fame is not what you think it is. We are sold fame and fortune like it is the thing to aspire to. What is being done to us is we are being given an advertisement to sell our souls. That is what it is. It is the devil's way of getting us to render our souls to that dark entity, okay? And the product that we get sold is fame, yeah? Be rich and famous if you give me your soul, yeah? Well, let's look at this. Fame. The concept of fame is rooted with the goddess Fema, or Fama, as she is known, depicted here. And we've dealt with the soul contracts as well in previous Dragonologies, but the soul contract concept is very interesting, okay? And in fact, the origin of all contracts, in my opinion, from my research, originates with the concept of the soul contract, okay? And soul contracts are the origins and the oldest form of contract between human vessels, and it originates with the whole concept of human vessels contracting with angelic, dragon, jinn, demonic entities in return for some form of consideration, which is how contracts work. Contracts work on the basis of a return in the form of some kind of consideration. If no consideration is given, then no contract is rendered. Yeah, and this is how we talk about things, contract law. You've got to have some consideration rendered in order for a contract to be valid. Now, the consideration that we talk about here in return for the immortal soul would be fame and fortune. Yeah, that is the consideration. And power does have a price, okay? Fame, wealth, and power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. There is always a price to pay. Even the supposed people in the Christian church, no, they've all got deals with the devil for their particular, bits of power. I mean, we've had cardinals and stuff recently being arrested and found with priceless artworks that have supposedly been stolen, okay? They ended up in the homes of some of the wealthiest Jesuit cardinals out there. There's a reason why this stuff happens. Just saying. Now, let's look at some of the votives, our votive sacrifices in the public domain. Of course, our beloved Whitney Houston being one of them. Michael Jackson, yeah, Illuminati blood sacrifice, commonly known. Do the research; it's all over the web. Don't believe me. Heath Ledger. I mean, this guy died in the middle of filming Dr. Parnassus' Imaginarium, which you have to watch. I mean, this guy has an all-seeing eye on his head in the film, and there's so much in this film that you just go, what? He died in the middle of this film? Cannot be an accident. It cannot. It's a sacrifice. Of course it is. He is a votive sacrifice. Paul Walker, also Illuminati blood sacrifice. And it's become an epidemic. Why do you want to be famous? We've got some very famous celebrities. Randy Quaid has made over $40 million in the industry. In exile, he's living in exile with his partner in Canada. And his brother, Dennis Quaid, is so heavily in with the Illuminati and the cults of Hollywood, they don't even speak to each other anymore. Okay, they're on opposite ends of the coin. Randy Quaid was smart enough to exile himself. But he's the one who's brought up this gang of star whackers, which are basically a group of supposed high-profile assassins, lawyers, and all doctors who all work together to terrorize celebrities out of their money and their fortune. And some of them get driven quite literally crazy because they are mind controlled when they are taken into these supposed rehab facilities. They are programmed and mind controlled and tortured and programmed into having multiple personalities, alters. What the public sees is very different to what is inside, which is really a fractured, broken person that's been tortured. So celebrities are hounded to keep them in line and to keep them in line with their contractual obligations because they all have to sell their soul for fame and fortune. Others are simply hunted by star whackers and are ruthlessly extorted because not everybody who is famous has sold their soul. There are genuinely some very talented people out there who have made their way to the top through hard work and who are being extorted by star whackers. So who wants to be famous? Seriously, because you may end up being dead at the age of 27. A number of these people, and it's an extortionate amount of people who have died under mysterious circumstances, and they blame it on drugs, and they get to join the 27 Club. Some of the most talented people we've known, taken from us in the prime of their youth. The bottom line, people, fame is an illusion of the ego. Do not be fooled into selling your soul for illusions. Yeah? It's a whole story of, I don't know, believing that this slimming pill will make you thin without diet and exercise. It's an illusion. You pay all that money for it and you take it. It doesn't work because you're still eating the same thing. You're still doing the same exercise. It's not real. Yeah, it's all illusions. We buy into certain concepts. We buy into fame, but it's not real. It's simply not a real thing. Eckhart Tolle, one of the most profound authors of our time, had a very interesting thing to say about fame. I'd like to read this out to you. Eckhart Tolle said, "The bane of being famous in this world is that who you are becomes totally obscured by the collective mental image. Most people you meet want to enhance their identity, their mental image of who they are, through association with you. That is, of course, if you are famous. They are looking to complete themselves through you, or rather, the mental image they have of you as a famous person, a larger-than-life collective conceptual identity, which is your external locus of identity. It's not really you. The absurd overvaluation of fame is just one of the many manifestations of egoic madness in our world." Tolle quotes Einstein speaking of a grotesque contradiction between what people consider to be my achievements and abilities and the reality of who I am and what I am capable of. Tolle adds, "This is why it is hard for a famous person to be in a genuine relationship with others, not dominated by the ego with its image-making and self-seeking." And if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about why you shouldn't be famous, please go check out my interview I did in my Freedom Central days with Fritz Springmeier, where he talks about how to program a completely undetectable, mind-controlled slave with alters and everything, and how that is done to the people in Hollywood and how he's actually helped people deprogram from that. And all these people and all these young children out there who perhaps are thinking of, I want to be famous, I want to be an actress, I want to be a singer. Seriously, do some research. You don't want to get involved with that mess. There's far better places for you to put your talents. Seriously, there are. And that's it for us tonight, folks. If you have missed anything, feel free to catch up on all our previous work. Series 1, Season 1 of Dragonology, episodes 1 to 13 are available for you all to view, and as well as episodes 1 through to 5 are all uploaded and available for you to view. And if you would like to view them in high definition, please go to ethymarket.com and you can get all of our CCN archive in high definition there. And at the same time, you can support free and independent media by purchasing and downloading a high-definition version of our work, or you can become a monthly pledger, and for €10 a month, you can get unlimited access to CCN's high-definition downloads from ethymarket.com. If you have missed anything or you want to know where any of our other shows are being broadcast, please check out our weekly updated broadcast guide. This is available on the Conscious Consumer Network homepage, which is consciousconsumernetwork.tv. And of course, please support free and independent media by donating to us. And as always, we thank everybody who does continue to support free and independent media. We really do need you to continue pledging to us and supporting us. Otherwise, we will not be able to stay in the air. You own our network, we belong to the public, and we do this because we love you all. And that is it from me tonight. My name is MEL VE. It's been great being with you, and I'll see you guys all again next week. Bye for now.
If you really had to make a difference on a large scale with minimal resources, how would you go about it? Have you ever dared to dream of doing that which seems impossible? On a planet steeped with corruption and destruction, the question beckons, how do we change it? Media has a far-reaching impact on people and has been used to manipulate humanity into our current destructive patterns. In order to affect people into moving into constructive patterns of behavior, we need to construct a new paradigm of media. Conscious Consumer Network has been created with the explicit intention of giving the amazing truth-seeking, solutions-orientated, alternative media a place to fully realize their true potential with a cutting-edge, high-tech professional media platform. In turn, some of the greatest freedom-seeking hearts and souls of our time have realized the true potential of what has been created and have come together to provide their insight and inspiration on CCN. Conscious Consumer Network has become a unique, interactive information and educational network which provides a free-to-view, live-stream, ultra-high-definition channel to the world and features 25 live shows a week and growing with the addition of multiple language broadcasts. CCN has features comparable with mainstream media, such as being able to pause and rewind broadcasts whilst being live streamed. Catch up on missed or previous broadcasts, now available from CCN High Definition Downloads. You can now purchase a high definition download of your favorite CCN show from ethymarket.com. Support free and independent media by becoming a monthly pledger. This can be done with a monthly pledge of €10, which will allow you unlimited access to CCN's high definition downloads, which hosts a back catalogue of over 250 shows which have been aired since the launch of CCN on the 1st of January 2015. In order to keep CCN on the air, public funding is needed. Please donate to CCN's Network Support Fund or become a monthly pledger. Help keep alternative media in the hands of the people. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.